Every morning, without thinking about it, millions of people over 65 sit down to the same breakfast they've eaten for decades. Toast. Cereal. Orange juice. Maybe a bowl of oatmeal with a little brown sugar. Maybe a glass of low-fat milk. It feels responsible. It feels healthy. It feels like exactly the kind of breakfast a person who takes care of themselves is supposed to eat. And for most of their adult lives, it probably was fine. But here's what nobody tells you, and what the food industry has absolutely no incentive to tell you, is that after 65, the body you are feeding in the morning is not the same body you had at 45. The rules have changed. The biology has shifted. And several of the foods that were neutral or even mildly beneficial in your middle years are now doing something quietly, persistently harmful to your joints, your inflammation levels, your insulin response, and the very systems that are supposed to keep you moving without pain. This isn't about eating less. It isn't about going on a diet. It's about something far more specific, the particular foods that interact badly with an aging body in the morning hours. When your cortisol is elevated, your gut is working hardest, and your joints are at their most vulnerable. Stay with me. Because this changes everything about what you put on your plate before 9 a.m. Richard was 68 when his daughter started paying closer attention to what he ate for breakfast. She'd flown home for a long weekend and found him in the kitchen at 7 a.m., standing over a bowl of corn flakes with skim milk and a large glass of orange juice, the same breakfast he'd eaten since his 40s. He moved slowly. His knees bothered him. He'd mentioned, more than once, that mornings were the hardest part of his day, that his hands didn't work right until nearly noon, that he felt foggy and heavy for hours after waking. "You've eaten this same breakfast for 30 years, she said. "It's healthy," he said. She didn't argue. But she'd been reading, really reading, about what aging does to metabolism, to insulin sensitivity, to gut permeability. And she had a quiet suspicion that the breakfast her father had been eating faithfully for 3 decades was no longer serving him the way he thought it was. She was right. And the changes they made, small, specific, not dramatic, altered the texture of his mornings within 6 weeks. Here is what she found. The morning biology of the aging body. To understand why certain breakfast foods become problematic after 65, you need to understand what happens inside your body during the first 2 hours of the day. When you wake up, cortisol, your body's primary stress hormone, is at its daily peak. This is natural. Cortisol helps rouse your system, raises your blood sugar slightly, and prepares you for the demands of the day. In a young body, this morning cortisol spike is managed efficiently. Insulin responds quickly, blood sugar normalizes, and the system moves on. But after 65, several things have changed. First, insulin sensitivity has declined, meaningfully, not dramatically, but enough to matter. Where once your body could process a surge of dietary sugar quickly and cleanly, it now takes longer, produces more insulin to do the same job, and leaves blood sugar elevated for a wider window. This extended blood sugar elevation is not benign. Chronic, repeated morning blood sugar spikes, even mild ones, drive systemic inflammation. And systemic inflammation, as decades of research have confirmed, is one of the primary accelerants of joint degeneration, cognitive decline, and cardiovascular disease in older adults. Second, gut permeability has increased. The intestinal lining, which in younger adults forms a tight barrier between digested food and the bloodstream, becomes more porous with age. Certain foods, particularly refined grains and certain processed sugars, interact with this more permeable gut in ways that allow inflammatory compounds to enter the bloodstream more readily. The result is what researchers call low-grade systemic inflammation, not the acute inflammation of an injury, but the slow, invisible, chronic kind that silently damages tissue over years. Third, the morning hours are precisely when your joints are most compromised. Overnight, cartilage partially dehydrates. Synovial fluid, the thick, lubricating fluid inside your joints, becomes temporarily thinner and less abundant. Your joints are, in those first hours, at their most vulnerable. What you choose to eat during this window either supports the recovery of joint fluid quality, or further suppresses it through inflammation. With that biology in mind, let's look at the specific foods. The foods to avoid. 1. Sweetened breakfast cereals, including the healthy ones. This is the one that surprises people most, because the marketing has been so persistent and so effective. Whole grain cereals. Bran flakes. Granola. Honey nut varieties. The boxes feature words like heart healthy and high fiber and whole grain goodness, and people over 65 have been told to trust those words for decades. Here is what the box doesn't tell you. Most breakfast cereals, including many marketed as healthy, have a glycemic index comparable to white bread or higher. They cause a rapid spike in blood sugar within the first 30 minutes of eating them. In a 68-year-old body with reduced insulin sensitivity, that spike is slower to resolve, stays elevated longer, and triggers an inflammatory response that cascades through the system for hours afterward. Granola is particularly misunderstood. It is calorie-dense, often high in added sugars and refined seed oils, and creates a blood sugar arc that peaks sharply and drops steeply, leaving the person feeling foggy, hungry, and inflamed by mid-morning. The oats in granola are real. But the way granola processes those oats strips away most of the metabolic benefit and replaces it with a glycemic load the aging body cannot manage well. The gentle, sustained energy breakfast that people over 65 actually need looks nothing like a bowl of cereal. It looks like protein. It looks like fat. It looks like fiber that slows digestion rather than triggering it. 2. Commercial orange juice. Orange juice has held the position of quintessential healthy breakfast drink for so long that questioning it feels almost heretical. But it needs to be questioned, particularly for people over 65. An 8-ounce glass of commercial orange juice contains roughly 24 grams of sugar. No fiber. No fat. No protein. Just sugar and a collection of vitamins, delivered in a format that hits the bloodstream within minutes. In the morning, with cortisol already elevated and insulin sensitivity already reduced, that 24-gram sugar bolus lands like a detonation in the metabolic system. The vitamin C is real. The antioxidants are real. But here is the thing about orange juice that almost nobody says plainly: you can get all the vitamin C you need from a whole orange, one orange, not a glass made from 5 of them, and a whole orange delivers that vitamin C wrapped in fiber, which slows absorption, blunts the blood sugar response, and actually allows the nutrients to do what they're supposed to do. Orange juice for people over 65 is, in practical terms, a sugary drink that happens to contain vitamins. And that distinction matters enormously. 3. White toast and most commercial breads. Bread is deeply cultural. Deeply comforting. For many people over 65, toast in the morning is not just food, it's ritual, memory, continuity. And the goal here is not to be cruel about that. But here is the biology. White bread, and most commercial whole wheat breads, which are more refined than their marketing suggests, are processed almost immediately into glucose upon digestion. The glycemic index of white bread is roughly equivalent to pure table sugar. The glycemic index of most commercial, whole wheat bread is only slightly lower. In either case, the blood sugar response in the first hour after eating is significant, and in a body over 65, it is significantly more damaging than it would be in a younger body. The issue compounds when toast is the primary or only carbohydrate at breakfast, consumed without sufficient protein or fat to slow its digestion. Toast with jam. Toast with margarine. Toast with orange juice. Each item in that breakfast pushes blood sugar faster and higher than the aging metabolic system can handle cleanly. And that daily, repeated morning inflammatory load adds up, quietly, invisibly, over months and years, to joint pain, cognitive fog, and fatigue that people attribute simply to getting older. It is not simply getting older. It is a specific, modifiable choice being made at the breakfast table every morning. 4. Low-fat flavored yogurt. Low-fat yogurt, particularly the flavored varieties that line grocery store shelves, occupies a unique position in the landscape of breakfast foods. It sounds like exactly what a health-conscious older adult should eat, and it is, in many cases, metabolically closer to dessert than to medicine. Here is why. Full-fat plain yogurt contains beneficial probiotics, protein, calcium, and fat that slows digestion and supports satiety. These are genuinely useful things, particularly for aging gut health and bone density. But when manufacturers remove the fat from yogurt, the product loses its creaminess, its flavor, and its satiety. To compensate, they add sugar, sometimes a great deal of it. A single container of low-fat fruit yogurt from a major brand can contain 15 to 25 grams of added sugar. The probiotic content is often negligible after processing. What you are left with is a product that is low in the protective elements of dairy and high in the inflammatory elements of refined sugar. For people over 65 who want the genuine benefits of fermented dairy, the answer is full-fat plain Greek yogurt, possibly with a small amount of fresh fruit added. The fat slows the absorption of any natural sugars. The protein supports muscle maintenance, which becomes increasingly critical after 65. The cultures, if the yogurt is genuinely live, support the gut microbiome, which is increasingly understood to have a direct relationship with joint inflammation. The difference between these two products is not subtle. And reaching for the one that sounds healthier without reading the label is, for millions of people over 65, a daily metabolic mistake. 5. Processed breakfast meats. Bacon. Sausage links. Breakfast ham. These foods are beloved, and the concerns about them are real, not because of saturated fat, which has been significantly rehabilitated in the nutritional science of the last decade, but because of something different. Processed meats, meats that have been cured, smoked, salted, or chemically preserved, contain high levels of compounds called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. AGEs are formed when proteins are cooked at high temperatures with sugars present, or when meats are subjected to curing processes. In the body, AGEs bind to specific receptors and trigger an inflammatory signaling cascade. In younger bodies, this inflammatory response is dampened relatively efficiently. In bodies over 65, the AGE-triggered inflammation is both more pronounced and slower to resolve. The consistent, daily consumption of AGE-rich foods at breakfast, bacon, sausage, cured breakfast meats, contributes meaningfully to the chronic low-grade inflammation that is one of the most powerful drivers of joint degeneration and pain in older adults. This is not about the occasional strip of bacon. It is about the daily, habitual presence of these foods at the meal when the body is already dealing with elevated cortisol and reduced insulin sensitivity. Eggs, particularly eggs cooked gently, scrambled low and slow or poached, are rich in protein, in choline, which supports brain health, and in a fat profile that does not trigger the same AGE-related response. The egg has been unfairly maligned for decades. For people over 65, it is one of the most valuable breakfast foods that exists. What to eat instead? This is not a prescription for deprivation. It is a prescription for replacement. The breakfast that genuinely serves a body over 65 is built around a few simple principles. Protein comes first. Fat is not the enemy, it is the satiety and anti-inflammatory ally. Carbohydrates, when present, come wrapped in fiber and eaten after protein and fat have already begun to slow digestion. And the morning drink is not sugar in a glass, but something that hydrates and supports rather than inflames. 2 eggs, poached or scrambled gently, with a handful of spinach cooked in a small amount of olive oil. A cup of full-fat plain yogurt with a few blueberries, not a cup full of them, but a few, because blueberries contain some of the most potent anti-inflammatory antioxidants of any fruit, and a small amount is enough. A cup of warm bone broth, properly made, long simmered, which delivers collagen peptides and minerals directly to the joint-supporting systems that need them most. A glass of water with a small pinch of mineral salt and a squeeze of lemon. This breakfast is not complicated. It is not expensive. It does not require a degree in nutrition or an hour of preparation. It requires only the willingness to understand that the body you are feeding at 68 is genuinely different from the body you were feeding at 48, and that feeding it differently, specifically, strategically, with an understanding of what aging biology actually needs, is not restriction. It is, in the most practical sense, care. Richard's daughter made the changes gradually. She didn't lecture her father. She just started bringing different things when she visited, cooking breakfast on Sunday mornings, leaving notes on the refrigerator about what to try during the week. 6 weeks later, he called her. He said that his mornings were different. Not dramatically. Not miraculously. But he was out of bed more easily. His hands felt better by 9 a.m. rather than noon. The fog that had settled over his first hours of the day had thinned. He'd walked an extra block without thinking about it. "It's just breakfast," he said. And she said, "Yes. But breakfast is every day. If you are over 65, or approaching it, or loving someone who is, this is the invitation. Not to overhaul your entire diet, not to follow a program, not to spend more money or more time. Just to look at what you put on your plate in the first hour of the day with a little more clarity. A little more knowledge of what your particular body, at this particular age, genuinely needs. The habits of a lifetime are not betrayals. They are just habits. And habits, quietly, one morning at a time, can change. Please like, share, and comment. Thank you for watching.